a Motorsport Podcast Network production. Hey Sleuthers, this is a mini pod. We're going back in the files on this episode, and for good reason too, because this weekend at Sandown marks Will Davison's 600th Supercars Championship race start. That's coming up on the Saturday at the Penrite All Sandown 500, and when you go back over Will Davison's Supercars career, it started back in 2004. Makes me feel a little old because I was there at Winton in a Team Dynamik run Commodore under Mike Imrie's number 14 franchise. So a lot's happened since then. 2 Bathurst 1000 wins, 22 Supercars Championship race wins, and a career that's seen Will jump between lots of different cars and teams. But the common thread is he's been a winner with all of them, from Dick Johnson Racing first era, and indeed his second run with the team, Holden Racing Team, Erebus with the Mercedes, Techno winning at Bathurst, and of course Ford Performance Racing for that period there where he was a real championship challenger in 2012. We've decided to celebrate Will's 600th by going back to the road to his first. So if you're a listener of the pod, hardcore, OG, go right back to 2019, you'll remember the 2-part chat that I did with Will back then. Now, safe to say, a fair bit's happened since then. We're probably due to get him on the pod again at some stage soon. But let's go back to that chat. Let's paint the picture and get the run-up to how he made his Supercars debut with Team Dynamik, how the deal came together, how things went at Winton, and of course the Enduros that he shared with his late great friend Dale Breed. And then there's that drama in Adelaide that a lot of people forgot, where he was going to drive in 2005 and then he wasn't driving in Adelaide in 2005. Right, let's rewind back on this V8 Sleuth Pod Mini to Will Davison and the pathway to race 1 as we celebrate his 600th Supercars Championship race. So let's rewind back to the start of the Supercars era. How does the Team Dynamik deal that you ended up in late 04, you drove the endurance races for them and a couple of single race rounds. How did that start? Who made the call? Were there other teams even ringing you ringing them? How did it all kick off?
Well, that stage, only real relationship I'd had with any V8 team was Gary Rogers at that stage, who was a great backer of mine in Formula Ford.
Valvoline sponsorship in
Valvoline, Cummins Repco, and but I wasn't at that stage really. Never really spoke seriously about doing endurance races or anything. We were firmly fixed on going to Europe, which Gary, to his credit, at the end of that Formula Ford year, say what you may about Gary, but all I know is, we had a great year. I think represented him and his sponsors well. And at the end of that year, we were going to the festival, and he basically...
The Formula Ford Festival.
The Formula Ford Festival at Brands Hatch.
Yep.
And he had no requirement to help me whatsoever. But I remember him saying to us, you guys have done such a great job this year for us and our sponsors. I'd like to throw you an extra $5,000 or whatever it was to help you get to the festival. Gary did not have to do that. And I remember he went above and beyond to support us to even go to Europe, not necessarily stay in Australia. So, but at that stage, he had no other contact with V8 Supercars, but there was one team in those early stages that was always on the phone at the end of 03, when maybe media reports were out there that, I'd been doing well, but financially things were tough. So Oscar Fiorinato was ringing quite frequently at that stage. Just anytime you come home, please give me a call. Anyone that knows Oscar, incredibly passionate guy, maybe too passionate at times, but really got me my break. He was all for young drivers who've been in Europe. It's what Ambrose had done. It's a really great schooling for young drivers. And they had at that stage a team with so much potential. They had a great setup, and it all looked, as they showed in those first few years, that they came in with guns blazing and potentially could have been a great powerhouse, that Team Dynamik. So I'm not going to say we were sold the dream, because on paper, things were looking good for them. It could have gone either way, but either way, it was as simple as that. I'd come home a week or two, I think, in about July, and Oscar's like, quick, fly to Mallala, let's have a run in one of these V8 Supercars. Of course I was going to say yes. And I remember I did a couple of laps next to Simon Wills, and then I think I did 2 on my own. Then it was just throw a passenger in, and these things, H-pattern back then, they were a bit of a beast. But yeah, I was straight into it. I just copied exactly what Simon did, and from then on, just took a few passengers, and then in the middle of the day, they're like, "Oh, we'll give you a couple of laps on your own with a good set of tyres." And I came in, and apparently went quite quick. As quick as I'd gone, I don't know, but I was quite competitive, and it was sort of that night on that, Oscar, they sort of said, "We're going to run you next week at Winton in a wild card in the main game." And I'm like, "Mate, I've done 14 rides and 3 laps on my own in a V8 Supercar, and you're sending me in the main game at Winton and in another chassis." I mean, I couldn't even change gear in the thing properly, but it was that third car, and it was pouring with rain. And I remember we had a bit of an electrical issue. I was 10 minutes late in the first practice at Winton because we had a problem. And I remember just going out on this hot track. I was still struggling with the roof over my head, the mirrors. Like, I was so far out of my comfort zone. And I've gone straight out with 32 Supercars in the middle of their championship campaign, and it's wet. And I remember Tander once coming across the bow of me and just sort of running me. He didn't even know. He was just, as you are in the middle of your supercar, I was just this kid out of my depth. And these guys were on a mission. They were on top of their game, driving these cars perfectly. And I'm absolutely hanging on. I'll never forget how foreign I felt. But I remember finishing like 8th quickest that session. I got in the wet. It was pretty easy to drive. It was just like any car. Anyway, we did a couple of those races there in Oran Park, which led into the Enduros, and formed a great relationship with Dynamik, and was spending a lot of time in Adelaide with Willsey and Oscar. And pretty early on, simply ended up in a 2-year contract being put in front of me, where I was a paid professional. And at that stage, I'd come from hell, like in terms of financially, just was over it.
You'd been paying out, but now you could actually get paid to drive.
Yeah, and I was living the dream. But I mean, I was so burnt out. I mean, you're doing a lot of driving in England, which sounds crazy now looking back. But I was just... going to racetracks, and you can't get in the car this morning, the money hasn't come through from Australia, and it was just forever a grind, and that's what it is over there. That's what it's all about. But eventually it was just not having the funds, the budget, banging down, flying back to Australia every month, going to meetings, banging down every door you could, getting rejected time after time, getting promises, and it get let down. And I was up for it, but after 3 years, it would get you down, and then to finally be told, here's a race car, we can pay you to drive it. You're just... Okay. And I remember the first feelings I had in this big, heavy touring car, H-pattern gearbox. People say V8 Supercar, big taxis. As a race car goes, not that cool to drive. But my impressions were like, I just spent 3-4 years in the coolest cars you could ever imagine. Formula 3 cars. They're the most perfectly balanced, wicked little race cars going around. But I was just like, it was a whole new world, and I just remember it was so cool to drive this big beast. I think I was just looking for something different, a new challenge. But I was keen, I was committed. We went on with the deal, with that one clause, like I said, knowing that if something happens in Formula One, I have an out clause, and we had a good crack after that test. We did put some big feelers out there to get a budget together for the Minardi seat. I think Stoddy said you need about 6 million, or you're 1.5 to be the Friday tester. And that was up against guys that were bringing 12 and 15. So he wanted an Aussie in there, and we tried to hit up some big Aussie companies. And we did have a good little crack for a bit, but it wasn't to be.
So with the Dynamik thing, did you actually sign a deal? Because in 2005, you talked about the circumstances for you changing. Their circumstances changed because I think there was a licensed sale or something. Tony Longhurst became involved in Team Dynamik, and you were, from memory, you were in Adelaide going to drive at the Clipsal 500, but you didn't get in a car. So am I right in remembering that there was I think Longhurst acquired one of their franchises or something along those lines, and your contract was not? How did that all work? How did you end up on the sidelines at what was supposed to be your first Clipsal 500?
Pretty crazy, but it was, I was over in Adelaide, and we were going to the Grand Prix, and I remember we sold a licence. Okay, big deal. How does that affect me? Nope, doesn't.
But you've got a contract with Dynamik at
clear
that
as
time.
day. 2-year contract, clear as day. Unbreakable, watertight. So did the Grand Prix, and Simon Wills didn't drive, and I drove the 44 Team Dynamik owned contract, and Tony Longhurst drove the other one,
which was 45,
and had a pretty actually good run. I literally, these are the days you got to remember, I didn't physically sit in a V8 Supercar from Sunday night at Bathurst, lap 13 when the thing blew up. I hadn't physically changed a gear in a V8 Supercars to Thursday practice at Albert Park. I'd been in Formula 1 cars. I'd been everywhere, and we couldn't even get a test day. It was just front up. Let's go. Again, rookie coming in, not even a test. Now you see all the rookie days and that now. Times were different, and but rolled out and had a pretty good Grand Prix for memory, where we ran in the top 10 and there was an intermediate race and I'd qualified 11th or 12th. Again, enough to make an impression, very luckily.
For what that car was, it was a good result.
Yeah, and that was all pretty normal.
But then what happened
in Adelaide? I remember being in Adelaide for the week, and I sort of hadn't been paid. But that was all good. It was, you'll be right. And I eventually I remember handed a little bit of a payment. Anyway, just carried on with it. Went to Adelaide, and next thing it was, because Oscar was passionate. He just wanted fast guys in his car. Wilsey was there getting ready. I'm there getting ready. And eventually, come like the Wednesday night or Thursday, my helmet's in the garage, like everything. You're ready to go. And it's, no, you're just driving Tony's car, 45, So I'm like, yep, cool, whatever. So I just need you to quickly sign something, I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Next thing I'm effectively in the hands of Tony. When I had a contract and a deal, it was like, oh, hey, mate, here's whatever Tony, it's his business, a 5-year management contract, 2-year deal, but not getting paid. It was sort of, I'm like, well, no, why am I going to sign that? I've got a deal.
I've got this.
I've got a deal.
Yeah.
Anyway, you imagine me. I just wanted to drive. I'm like, screw it. I'll just sign it. I just want to drive. And anyway, we had to get our heads together and ringing back home. And it's like, no, under all means, do not sign that contract. So anyway, long story short, we were willing and able to honour our contract, drive the 44, but Wilsey was clearly in the 44. And it was very embarrassing. There was press releases out, and I had to rock up there Friday morning with my helmet on and ready to get in the car and
to fulfil your
obligation. And just really unfortunate, because I had a good relationship with him, but it was really all over my head a bit. But I couldn't sign the agreement with Tony. At the last minute, he got his mate in, Max Wilson, to drive the car. That's fine, as he would. It was nothing to do with Tony really at all. It was just to do with the dynamic side of things. And unfortunately, from their point of view, he's got his son as the driver, and they'd committed to me. So a pretty unfortunate set of circumstances, which did drag on for quite a while, unfortunately, and worked in our favour, because I had an ironclad contract, simple as that, and it was only settled many, many, many months later. But in the meantime, luckily, I'd been able to do enough to attract DJR Sunday night in Adelaide on the beers at a nightclub.
It's where all the good deals happen.
Stevie J's like, well, what are you doing for the Enduros, mate? And I said, no idea. And it was Monday morning. He goes, Dean Orr will call you in the morning, and put me on a plane, went and met them Tuesday, signed a deal for the Enduros literally a few days later, which was pretty cool, which then started the DJR journey.